Hey everybody, welcome to episode 53 of Weighing In with Andy Hamilton and David Mirikitani. I'm Andy Hamilton coming to you from Cedar Falls, Iowa, joined on the phone as always by the czar of the track wrestling rankings, David Mirikitani, coming to you from St. Louis. Welcome back, David.
Andy, in my best John Sterling impression, the Yankees win. We got to watch
I'm pretty happy about that. Pretty happy about that, David. I tell you what, if you, I don't know if you caught the post-game show last night, but one of the funniest things I've seen in a long, long time was David Ortiz imitating John Sterling.
No, I'm sure his was a lot better than mine. I'm sure his was better than mine.
His was pretty good. His was pretty good. Yeah, last night was a good night to be a Yankees fan. It's been a great season to be a Yankees fan, but, man, what a fun team, and they got it done, David.
Yeah, we were, I think, both watching in the background while you were helping me out a ton, finalize the rankings with getting grades right, and I had doubled up a couple, two kids from the same school. So I really, truly appreciate you committing last night to making these possible to get out today. So thank you.
Well, thank you for all your hard work with those. It takes a lot of time and effort to put the rankings together, to put 250 names together in the right order and make sure we got pretty close to who's going to be at which weights and all that. So be on the lookout for those on Trackwrestling.com. We also have the U23 Trials to recap. David, such a fun weekend up in Rochester. Great wrestling. Man, tremendous performance by Dayton Fix to take out Nathan Tomasello. Joey McKenna wrestled really well. Sam Brooks was lights out at 86 kilos. Richie Lewis comes back from shoulder injury, wrestled only one match a year ago, and rolls through the bracket at 70 kilos. Some other guys that turned into pretty strong performances as well. Man, Bulu Wallen put on quite a show to get to the finals at 65 kilos and gave McKenna quite a scare there. I think, in the second match, he was ahead with about a minute to go. And also Mitch McKee, man, he's so good in freestyle. But, pretty good freestyle team that the United States put together here. And, we got a lot to talk about from that end. We might as well start it with Fix and Tomasello though, because that's, the match or the series that, everybody was talking about going in. And that's the one that everybody was talking about coming out.
Yeah.
David, your impressions of Dayton Fix from what you've seen of him and, just your thoughts on him sweeping the two-match series against Nathan Tomasello.
Well, obviously, I think we all can't help but be impressed. I think Dayton's actually just a super nice kid. He wrestled in our event. His dad's a good friend of mine and, friends with Randy Couture. That's how I met him years ago. And I'm just impressed how the kid keeps jumping levels. Like he was one of the best in the country. Then, it feels like he's the best in the country. And then, wins the world. And, I read your article. I'm like, I don't want to misphrase you, but basically that he proved he didn't even belong at that level. Like he needed to be at the next level, that those guys couldn't even really give him a match. And then goes to this. And, Tomasello, you can make an argument. He's the preseason number one at 125. Worst he is number 2 at 133, and he wins. Now, rules are different, quad pods and things like that, but they both know what the rules are going in, and he wins. And just awfully impressive. And you combine that with Bulu Wallen, and then you combine that with Nick Piccinini, Cade Brock, and, when Dean Heil graduates.
Smith, and
I'm just looking at those. Down. Right, just those bottom weights,
Smith,
though,
yep.
Just feels like, Gio Martinez, John Splaylock. It feels like Oklahoma State's going to be really good in the first 5 weights for a lot of years. And and I was there Friday and got to watch those guys, unofficially train a little bit, and that was fun to watch too. So yeah, really good stuff from Dayton. Yeah,
absolutely. I was super impressed with how many different ways he scored against Tomasello. And then I had 3 instances in the match that I think are in the series, in my opinion, that were really pivotal were the quad pod positions where Tomasello was behind him, rear standing position there. And was only able to get 1 point on push-outs on all three of them. And two of them happened at the beginning of the first match, which was an 8-7 match. If he catches those in for takedowns, certainly, potentially a different outcome in that match. Tomasello was in on the leg to finish as time expired in that one. You go to match 2, about a minute to go, another quad pod position that Tomasello couldn't turn into 2, had to settle for 1. That would have put him up on criteria. So those were key instances of Fix, just not conceding points, and also, like I said, really impressive on his feet, and we know what a hammer is. What a hammer he is on top with stuff he can do with gut wrenches, and he only got one opportunity really or he only got one turn in the 2 matches, but showed just so many more things he has in his arsenal. But tremendous performance by Dayton Fix. I think you got to think he's going to be in the mix to win another gold in Poland next month.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like NCAAs where we do seedings and or rankings and we know who's who. You don't always know, but gosh, I would almost bet on him blind. Because he's going to keep getting better. And he's in a program where that's important. Freestyle is important. So, yeah, I got the chance to talk to Piccinini this last weekend, and he talked about training with Dayton and, how fun that's been. And, Boo Llewellyn's a guy I've known since he was a senior in high school when he wrestled in our event, and just has to be one of the best backups in the country in any weight, period. Won Reno last year, beat Meredith, had some good wins up there.
Beat Ironman, Tech Ironman up there.
Yeah, super, super impressive. And, wouldn't be surprised if we saw him get some matches this year or even push for the spot up at 49. I wouldn't be surprised to see him and, give Gio everything he wants. I think they're just going to be good there for a long time. And Richie, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, your point on Llewellyn, I asked Joey McKenna afterward about what impressed you from an opponent's standpoint, or what made, from an opponent's standpoint, what challenges did Llewellyn present? And he said, keep in mind this is a 65 kilo weight class, and McKenna said, he felt big. He felt really big to him. So, I certainly think 49 is a strong possibility for him. And you got to think, down the road, like in how these pieces fit together for Oklahoma State with Piccinini, Cade Brock, Dayton Fix, that Llewellyn's place in the lineup is probably 49. His
future sure seems like it, right? I mean, we're doing roster management, and surprisingly, I didn't tell John Smith what I thought he should do with his lineup, but shocking, right? But it feels like, next year Dayton and Piccinini end up at 25 and 33, one way or the other, and Cade goes to 41 with Heil being gone, and then, you have those guys at 49, and it sure feels like Joe Smith is going to move up, so I know John Blaylock and those guys will be in the mix at 57. And to me, it feels like Joe would go up to 65 or 74, and Chandler would be at the other weight, and then Jacoby Smith would be there, and then, they'd have, they'd have either, Moore or Marsden at 84, or Jacoby Smith moving up, and then you got Weigel, and then I saw Derek Moore there this weekend, and he is huge. He's 245, and he looks like he's about 8% body fat.
Wow.
So that's their heavyweight. And he's a guy that can get to legs. He's a guy that wrestled Neville's tough last year in the duel, and moved up. So almost a little bit like a Holschlag, right? Who we're both close to based on, my dealing with him with Brawl and knowing him from Iowa, where they're going to get better as they know they're at that weight. So, he's obviously they locked him in the weight room and the food buffet line for about 6 months. And he looks really good. He's just a horse.
So, what else caught your eye from U23s?
Richie Lewis. Richie Lewis, because he's a hard guy to rank. We'll get into that, but he beat LaValle last year in the undercard of the NWCA All-Star meet, and then got hurt. He's a JUCO guy. You mentioned him a week or two ago on our podcast, how he was going to get extra matches. And, you know, I saw your interviews with him afterwards. Like, he seems like he's not like, well, Nolf's going to win it, I'm going to try to make the finals. Like, he feels like his mentality is, I'm going to go get it. And, you know, he went and got it. And Tyler Berger's super legit. And I think on paper, Tyler Berger would have been the favorite, certainly the betting favorite. And, you know, that's what's funny. Like, guys like us, you know, we like to do this stuff and talk about it, and the kids don't care. They just wrestle. You know?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I remember when I wrestled, like, we were supposed to, you know, I remember my sophomore year, I was supposed to lose to this guy who was undefeated. And, like, somebody told me afterwards, I'm like, I was supposed to lose to him? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. You know, like, you don't think that way. You just do you. And I know social media is a lot different than 100 years ago when I wrestled, but I really think it's the mentality of winners are the same. Like, we don't care what anybody thinks that's sitting with headsets on or writing articles or whatever. You know, we're wrestling, and I'm going to control my own destiny. So I think that I think he's a threat, a major threat, you know, very least All-American at 57. And, you know, you combine that with some of the other things Rutgers is doing, and they could be really, really legit this year. I mean, like top 10 to 12 legit this year.
Yeah, I'll be surprised if they're not, really, when you look at, you know, Soriano and you know, you mentioned Richie Lewis, Ashnault, Gravina, you know, some other guys right there on the periphery that if one or two of them take a step up, suddenly you're looking at a team that, you know, is firmly planted in the top 10.
Yeah, so. Yeah, we've got him just on the edge of it, and obviously Ashnault's health has a lot to do with that, but yep. I would agree with you. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. Yeah, then as far as the rest of U23s go, you know, one of the things that was surprising to me, I guess, 24 different spots on the world team handed out over the weekend, or I shouldn't say handed out, but earned. That's probably the right word.
Sure.
And none of the 24 spots, or none of the 24 final matches went to a third match. They're all 2-match sweeps, which I don't know that I can ever recall being at a World Team Trials where there wasn't a third match in the best of 3. But that was interesting. Thought Sam Brooks was really, really strong. 4-0 in the semis against Brett Farr, who dropped down to 86 kilos, and then he swept the best of 3 against Miles Martin. Looked really strong. You know, got I don't know how many situations I think almost half of the points that Sam Brooks, you know, going back and watching the matches, I think almost half of the points that he scored in the 2 matches were off, like, getting to the corner and go behind cradle type positions. He cradled Miles Martin a couple times. You don't see that a lot in freestyle, but Brooks made it happen a couple times. I thought Michael Krols was an interesting story, just in that he said afterward that he didn't even know that he was going to be in the tournament until a month ago. Him and Brett Farr had spent like the summer out on the West Coast doing camps, basically living out of his Jeep and pop-up trailer. Got back to Minnesota about a month ago, and Brandon Eggum said, hey, guys, there's a under 23 or 23 and under tournament. You guys qualify for it, and here's the kicker. It's in Rochester. And so basically they had no reason not to try, and he goes in and wins the heavyweight bracket. Granted, not the deepest star-studded bracket in the tournament, but nonetheless.
He won.
Yep. And he's heading to Poland. You know, I thought the Greco tournament was pretty entertaining, and Greco's taken a bit of a beating this summer, particularly after Paris, and you know, we just didn't see a lot of points and a ton of action in Paris. But you know, I thought in Finland at the Junior Worlds that there was some entertaining Greco going on. I thought cadet, same thing, highly entertaining, high-scoring matches, and hopefully we see the same at the U23 level because you know, going back and looking at some of these matches, at least in the final series from Rochester, there were some high-scoring matches. A lot of points going up on the board, and you know, certainly a lot of activity. You know, Kamal Bey ran through the tournament with the exception of his semifinal match against Alex Meyer, who, the former or past Fargo Greco cadet champion,
Yeah.
Of course, hasn't been wrestling much Greco the last 4 years, but, he gave Kamal Bay all he could handle. Myers up 7-2 with about a minute to go, and, Bay hit a 5 to go back in front on criteria. But, that's a guy where, certainly a 5-point lead is really never safe with Kamal Bay, and he continues to be a guy that you don't want to leave your seat when his name is called to the mat. So
yeah,
those are some of the takeaways for me.
Yeah, I actually just talked to his high school coach, Mike Powell, who's going to be on Matt Chat about Kamal and a bunch of those guys that were our senior level guys that are doing big things, and that's what he said. He's been super talented and a guy that. Unlike a lot of guys, he's not scared to lose trying to score points. And that's interesting, right?
Yeah. And he hopped on the mic a little bit both days, Saturday and Sunday, actually called, I think, the semifinals alongside Shane Sparks. And Shane went on about what a great job Kamal did on the mic, helping us on the live stream. So eager to go back and watch some of the matches that Kamal called just to see what kind of job he did. So anyway, you can certainly check out the U23 tournament, all the matches on demand on Trackwrestling.com. We also have our rankings for the upcoming college season. The preseason rankings are out. Those are presented by Resolite this year, and this podcast is sponsored by Resolite Sports Products, your one source for both classic and lightweight mats. From Resolite Zip Mat, the first and only tape-free mat to offer a waterproof interlocking connection system, to Resolite's exclusive Digiprint mat, the only fully customizable mat featuring unlimited graphics that brings unrivaled school branding to your new lightweight mat. Visit Resolite.com for all your wrestling mat needs. Resolite, the mat company. David, as we mentioned at the top, the rankings are out. You spent a lot of time digging through last year's results, going through names on this year's roster, and looking at how things shook out. Penn State, the number one.
Shocking.
In the preseason ranking. Yeah. As we expected last March when we left St. Louis, Penn State would be the early favorite for 2018, and the Nittany Lions checking in at 123 points, followed by Ohio State at 106. Oklahoma State with 95, Michigan 84.5, Missouri 56, a two-way tie between Arizona State and Minnesota at 43. Lehigh is number 8 with 42.5, Iowa number 9 at 40, and Virginia Tech 10th at 39.5. That 8 through 12 range, as always, we see a lot of teams stacked up through there, no exception this year. But, David, when you look, first of all, at the team rankings and how everything shook out after you got the 10 weights put together, what were some of the things that stood out to you?
First of all, I think people need to understand, I hope they do, we don't really do team rankings, right? You rank 10 weights and then you just do the math. So you don't, I think we all knew if you've done rankings at all, Penn State's returning 100 points at 5 weights. So it's going to be awfully hard to pass them, but, the Rutgers is 13th with 35 and the tied for 6th is 43. So, so you're talking about 7 teams there within 8 points. That's just, like one 7th place guy not doing it versus doing it. So that's really, I think that's intriguing, right? And we don't have Pat Downey points in for Iowa, because he's got to get eligible. And, so I think that mix right there, really was intriguing to me. I think Missouri continuing to be a top 5 program despite losing Jaden. I had Brian Smith on a while ago, and the guy just keeps, building and building and building and bigger goals. Michigan, you and I spoke, before we did these rankings this summer. Hey, Michigan and Arizona State, we think are going to be really, really good. Michigan looks like they could, certainly like right now, they're a favorite to be in the top 4. And, that they've done it before, but it's been a minute. So it'll be interesting to see if they can do that again. And really, as we go through this, I think for me, some of the struggles or where do you put certain guys individually, which obviously impacts the team things. And my rankings and our rankings, because obviously you have a hand in it, are very, very national tournament results biased. If you placed, even if you didn't have the best regular season, you're going to get credit for that because honestly, that's 10 years from now, that's all anybody's going to remember was how did you do at nationals. And it's also you proved you can score points, team points, and that's what we're doing. That's where we're measuring and counting. So, somebody who's 28-0 and goes 0-2 at nationals is going to be ranked behind a guy that was 10-11 but took 8th. And maybe that's wrong, but that's my philosophy, and I've been consistent about that all the way through. And again, it's just the beginning of the rankings, and it's just, people can wrestle their way out of those spots. But I sat in a lot of college seating meetings, and that's how a seating meeting would go. The guy that was 10-11 but took 8th would be ahead of the guy that was 28-0, and it wouldn't matter about head-to-head. It would matter. They would start with who's an All-American. So that's my, I guess, philosophical starting point on these things.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, we have 20 weeks of time during the season for guys to change where they are on the chart here. So
yeah,
there's going to be a lot of movement. There's going to be a lot that's going to change here, and we'll take a dive into a few of the weights here today. Let's kick it off, of course, with 125 pounds. We'll read 1 through 8 here. Number 1, David, you went with Darian Cruz, returning national champ, number 1. Nathan Tomasello from Ohio State, number 2, and we can talk a little bit about his situation here. Going to be out until January, most likely, with an injury that he sustained in the final series the other day against State and Fix in the finals of the U23 championships. Number 3, Ethan Lezak from Minnesota. Number 4, Nick Piccinini from Oklahoma State. Number 5, Nick Suriano from Rutgers. Number 6, Sean Russell from Edinburgh. Number 7, Ryan Milhoff, Arizona State. Number 8, Zeke Moisey from West Virginia. David, probably the 2 toughest things to determine in this weight class. Number 1, who's number 1? And then number 2, what to do with Nick Suriano.
This was the hardest weight class to rank at the top. I think most people probably understand that ranking like 18 through 25 can be a really jumbled mess. And we're the only ones that rank 21 to 25. And we do that because they score points at nationals, and we're trying to give people the most, representative picture we can of how we think they're going to do at nationals. Suriano has an argument to be 1. I mean, he beat Darian Cruz 8-0. Cruz has an argument to be number 1. He's the national champion. Tomasello has an argument to be number 1. He's 3rd, 1st, and 3rd, and only lost. And he lost last year up a weight to the guy that ended up winning nationals. And this obviously doesn't take into account Tomasello's injury, and I think we should talk about how that impacts rankings. But we sort of split the baby with Suriano. I'm a big believer, like I told you. I'm not going to put him above Cruz or Tomasello, who are both national champions at some point. And Lezak was a runner-up, and Piccinini was 4th. The really hard thing was to decide whether to put Suriano above or below Russell. I did feel comfortable then putting him ahead of Milhoff, who was 7th last year or a year ago in 16, and Moisey, who was 2nd in 15. And I don't believe that. Here's the other thing. People go, oh, well, you had Suriano ranked 5th, and let's say he ends up winning it. These are not my predictions. These are where I think they deserve to be ranked, and that's an entirely different conversation, and I hope people understand that. Yeah, I think that's really important. We're trying to rank you based on what we think you've earned. And Suriano had a great season, and he lost to Gilman, and he lost to Piccinini, but, it wasn't like he was losing in that match. He just got injured early. So we ranked him behind Piccinini because, he did get his hand raised in that match. So, but you could tell me Suriano's 3rd, and I would buy that. So that was the hard part. That putting him at 5 was, I think it feels right, but sometimes, you feel 100% conviction about something, and sometimes you're like, well, we had to put him somewhere, and this makes the most sense, but I'm not married to it. And I'm more in the second camp on that one.
Anything else you want to hit at 25?
Well, I mean, it's a deep weight. There's 8 returning All-Americans if you count all years, 3 round of 12 guys, 2 round of 16 guys, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 round of 24 guys. Then you've also got 4 round of 32s, and then Barlow McGee, who was lost in the round of 33. And then you've got some interesting guys we have at the bottom, like Dalton Macri, Sebastian Rivera. And there's some good guys that didn't get ranked, like Sean Nickel, Danny Vega, some guys like that, Austin Acid. And then Jose Rodriguez is going to try to be eligible at Cleveland State second semester, and he's a guy that came within a whisker of beating Joey Dance last year. So you got to figure if he does what he needs to do to be eligible, he would be in the mix somewhere. So those guys stick out to me.
Yep. Moving ahead to 133, David, you got number 1, Seth Gross, South Dakota State. Number 2, Stevan Micic, Michigan. Number 3, Oklahoma State's Cade Brock. Number 4, Lehigh's Scotty Parker. Number 5, Virginia's Jack Mueller, moving up from 125. Number 6, Mitch McKee, Junior World Silver Medalist from Minnesota, U23 World Team member. Number 7, Buffalo's Brian Lantry. Number 8, Scott Del Vecchio of Rutgers. Right on the cut line there of All-American points, you got Luke Pletcher of Ohio State. Number 9, Dom Force of Pittsburgh. Number 10, John Ernesty of Missouri. Number 11. So in Pletcher and Ernesty's case, in terms of the team race and in a projection there, if they can climb up a few more spots, that can significantly impact where teams are slotting
For sure.
in the top 5.
For sure, yeah.
So pretty cut and dry here, it looks like, from where things shook out last year.
Yeah.
Not a lot of tough calls here, was there?
No, the first 4 guys were in order of how they placed last year. Mueller, when you move up a weight, you get ranked behind all the guys that, medaled there. So we put him behind Scotty Parker, even though it was 6th versus 8th. McKee got the nod over the other 2 guys at round of 12, based on his summer. When you move down a weight and you're on that tier, I put guys at the top. So there were 3 round of 16 guys, Pletcher, Forrest, Ernesty, and I put Pletcher ahead of the other 2 because he came down from 41. And then there is a guy, Connor Schramm, in this mix who did place, several years back, but he was a round of 24 guy this last year. So he's at 13, but this weight does have 6 returning All-Americans. So, that's pretty interesting. And you've actually got, a kid like Colby Smith, who was at App State last year, transferred to Missouri, who would have been in the rankings. Ali Nazar's a guy that hasn't been healthy the last couple of years. You got guys like Taylor Lamont, Montorie Bridges, Rudy Yates, Tariq Wilson, maybe Jared Cortez, Philip Locks. I mean, there's a lot of names here of guys that could pop in at the, get themselves into the rankings, and wouldn't surprise, I think, you or me if that happened.
Anything else at 33?
No, I think it's a really important way for the team race, like you said, right? Ohio State, Pletcher getting on the podium, Corey Keener doing something there, or, if it's Cortez, them getting some points from that weight. And then, if Cade Brock can make the finals and knock one of those guys off, that certainly would help Oklahoma State's cause. And obviously Michigan's right there as well with Micic.
Moving ahead to 141, Dean Heil, 2-time NCAA champ from Oklahoma State, starts out as the obvious number 1. Number 2, North Carolina State's Kevin Jack, 2-time All-American. Number 3, Bryce Meredith from Wyoming, finalist a couple years ago, 2-time All-American. Number 4, Jaden Ironman, placed 5th last season. Number 5, Anthony Ashnall from Rutgers. Number 6, Tommy Thorne from Minnesota, an All-American last year. Number 7, Joey McKenna from Ohio State to Stanford transfer, who was the 3 seed last year, an All-American 2 years ago when he placed 3rd for Stanford. And then number 8, Colton McChrystal from Nebraska, round of 12 guy. Remains to be seen who will be the starter at 141 for the Huskers there. They've also got the super freshman Chad Redd. David, this 141, especially, the guys we just mentioned, man, it's going to be a lot of fun this year. There's going to be a lot of battles with these guys.
Agreed. And I'm not betting against Dean Heil. Just not doing that. I think anybody that did that has learned their lesson. One of the things, like I see Ashnault's name, and one of the things that it reminds me of, and we're going to formulate our thoughts on this, but on whether or not to leave a guy like Ashnault or Tomasello in the rankings, the problem if you take them out is it really, really skews the team scores. Like you take 16 points off of Ohio State or you take 10 points off of Rutgers, and it's just an inaccurate team thing, assuming they come back. The problem if you leave them in is how can guys jump them? Because they're not performing. So you're now comparing what they did last year versus what guys are doing this year. And then the other thing that is tied to this weight specifically is Colton McChrystal, because this comes up again at 165, and we'll get there. But Colton McChrystal, if Chad Redd beats out Colton McChrystal, I'm going to rank Chad Redd where Colton McChrystal is, because he's taking that spot. So in my opinion, he's earned that spot. Whereas if he just came in being the same wrestler he was, but Nebraska had nobody that had done anything last year coming back, he would have to start at the bottom and work his way up. Now, that might be wrong, but that's just the philosophy that I'm following.
And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, you look at it in this instance, at least. I mean, it's not like Chad Redd hasn't proven himself. I mean, he was a couple seconds away from being in the Midlands finals last year.
Over Kolostic, too. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Yep. So kind of fell asleep in the closing seconds of that match against Matthew Kolostic. But, Chad Redd's a guy with a tremendous upside, and I think we're going to see him win a lot of matches this year at some point, somewhere in the Nebraska lineup. I think the Huskers are eager to get him in the lineup, and it's a guy that's got high upside. I suspect we'll see him on the podium at some point, at somewhere in Cleveland. So anyway, 41, looking down the line a little bit here. The other guy, we kind of talked about where to put him. Kanan Storr from Iowa State, the freshman, had a tremendous redshirt season a year ago. Beat several of these guys that we've already talked about, McChrystal and Luke Pletcher at the Midlands last year.
Yeah.
Like I said, had a spectacular freshman year. Finished second at the Dave Schultz Invitational or Memorial Invitational. That's a guy that I know the Cyclones are pretty excited about. He slots in at number 19 behind Javier Gasca III from Michigan State. I know they met up at a tournament. I think the Michigan State Open early in the year, and Gasca got the best of him. So 19 is where you slotted in Storr. Anything else on your mind there, 41?
Storr and Gasca are two guys that I think will go up. I mean, Gasca is down because he went 0-2 at Nationals, but clearly he was injured. I mean, he got killed by Gulabon, who he had beaten 2 weeks earlier when he wasn't injured. But again, he was in the round of 32. I'm not going to just put him up above these other guys, but I did make him the highest round of 32 guy. And I think that's where you're allowed to have some discretion, while maintaining your consistency. Storr was a tough guy to rank, and you really helped me there, going through the results and justifying, well, he lost to this guy, but he beat these guys. And, based on data, not just the eye test, he seems to fit in here and is really defendable there. So that was really helpful. Yeah.
Moving on to 149, number 1, Zane Redford, two-time NCAA champ from Penn State. Number 2, Brandon Sorensen from Iowa. Number 3, Max Thompson from Northern Iowa. Number 4, Solomon Chishko, Virginia Tech. Number 5, Gio Martinez, All-American 2 years ago for Boise State. Now he is at Oklahoma State. Number 6, Matthew Kolodzik from Princeton. Number 7, Justin Oliver from Central Michigan. Number 8, Steve Blyce, the Northern Illinois transfer, at Minnesota now. David, clearly Zane Train is the undisputed number one. Then you got a couple guys from the Cedar Valley right here, Sorensen and Thompson, 2 and 3. When you look further down the line, Ryan Deacon at 14, the Junior World Silver medalist, guy that, didn't even place at the Eastern Michigan Open early in the season. Yeah. It's funny, I brought this up in a previous podcast that, one of the funniest lines from Finland was Matt Storniolo, the Northwestern coach, going up to Deacon after he made the Junior World Finals and saying, man, this tournament's a lot easier than the Eastern Michigan Open. That was one of my favorite lines of the summer. But, awesome. Deacon, a guy that, we just saw get better and better and better as the season went along. Third at the Midlands. Only loss there was to Sorensen. Beat some good guys there. Beat Davion Jeffries. I think he might have beaten Bannister there as well. But, really excited to see what he can do, a guy that can get the legs and, appears to have pretty strong build for this weight class. Going to be, I think, a strong-looking 49-pounder. Yeah. What else do you have your eyes on at 49?
I think there's a couple things. First of all, Justin Oliver is also a guy that All-Americaned a couple years ago. So you have 7 All-Americans at this weight. And you actually have 8 if you count Jason Surtis. Now, we made calls, and Maruka is the guy they're saying we should put in the line, in for ranking purposes. But if it was Surtis, based on credentials, he'd probably be 7th instead of Maruka 9th. So that's interesting to me. The other thing is, where do you put Keyshawn Hayes? Because we really don't know. We're guessing that McKenna's 41 and Hayes is 49, but they're going to wrestle off. And obviously they haven't, and we don't know the results, obviously, since it hasn't happened. And we don't really know who wants to go which weight. So, that's a thing. Then you got Jamal Morris, who's all the way up from 133, but he's certainly tall enough for that weight. And then some of these young studs out of Virginia, Sam Krivis, guys like that. Deacons, you mentioned him. I think that's, going to be one of the interesting stories at this weight to see how he does. He made a huge jump. Like you said, you go to DNP at the EMU to second in the world, and, it'll be interesting to see if he can keep that momentum. The other thing that's interesting is just like, where would Pat Lugo have slotted in, had he been here? And it's something, Iowa will, have him plugged in next year. So, that weight seems like they're pretty good there for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think they'll be curious. I'm curious to see, do they even consider cutting him down to 41 this year? Because he did get released from Edinburgh. He's eligible to go right away. Do they redshirt him and use him as Sorensen's replacement next year at 49, or do they cut him down this year and try to fill a hole there at 41?
Makes them a lot better, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And he would be 12th or 13th with us. He would be 13th immediately. So, that's interesting. That's really like, 13 versus 12 is usually not a big argument. So it's basically winning the last match, and he would be an All-American. Now you're talking about at least 5.5 more points for them. So that's going to be a very interesting thing to follow for sure.
Yep. Moving ahead to 157, Jason Nolf, Penn State returning NCAA champ, number 1. Joey LaValle, finalist 2 years ago from Missouri, number 2. Michael Kemmerer from Iowa, number 3. Joe Smith from Oklahoma State, number 4. Number 5, Tyler Berger from Nebraska. Number 6, Paul Fox from Stanford. Number 7, Micah Jordan from Ohio State. Number 8, Alex Pantaleo from Michigan. Number 9, we're going to go down a little further on this one. TJ Clagan from Ryder. So you got 9 All-Americans, 9 guys that have been on the stand. And then Richie Lewis, number 10, the guy that we talked about at the beginning of the show, such a tremendous weekend at the U23 Trials. Going to go one more spot to Jake Short, number 11, because he was a guy that was all over the map last year in our rankings. Yeah. We saw him win post some really big wins and then have some head-scratching losses. Eager to see what Minnesota gets out of Jake Short this year. David, what are the hot topics at 57 in your mind?
Well, one, I'm pretty sure Joe Smith is redshirting. So, I saw him this weekend and just talked to him. I just think that's going to happen. So that means everybody would slide up a spot. John Splaylock looks like he'd be the guy there. So he'd have to work his way in. But, that moves everybody up a spot. Clagan's a guy that has some head scratchers, to use that term, during the regular season, but was fifth in 15 and was round of 12 last year. So he does wrestle good when the tournament comes around. Micah Jordan was a guy that was like at 57 during his redshirt year and then went down to 41. He's kind of been all over, but it feels like this might be really a good weight for him just in terms of his body. And Lewis was the hardest one, right? Because he beat LaValle, had really no other body of work. Well, this is one where we did arbitrarily decide that he belongs there as if he was round of 12. And, there's an argument against that, but it helped that we just had this recent result where he beat Berger twice in freestyle. It makes it a lot easier to justify where he is. I know it's different rules, but at the end of the day, wrestling's wrestling and takedowns are takedowns. So, that helped a little bit. And then, you have a guy like Clayton Ream who's down at 21, who was the 6th seed last year and just had an awful tournament for him. So, he's a guy to keep an eye on. And then we don't even have guys like Freddie Stroker and Larry Early and some guys like that even in the rankings. So I would think those guys would probably end up working their way in as well.
Yep. Anything else this week, David? You want to cut it off at 57 and come back?
Sure.
The last 5
weeks
to come?
Yeah, everything that makes a lot of sense. Want to congratulate Chris Perry on getting married this weekend, and really there was a lot of cauliflower here at that reception. Nobody got robbed, but if somebody had came in, I don't think it would have ended well for them. So it was nice to be there. And then probably our number one fan, Kelly Heinecker. He loves our show, texts me every week about it, loves what you're doing, Andy, and he got married this weekend as well. So I want to congratulate him. And it's wrestling season almost, and it's fun talking about the rankings and putting all this stuff together. And I'm going to get to do some interviews with I got to interview Hardell Moore this last weekend. I got to see the Perry tournament or Perry Monument, and Track Wrestling is actually going to cover the Perry Tournament of Champions this year. So I'm excited about that. Got to do a sit down with Eric Guerrero in his house, which we'll probably put out around Christmas or something, but it was really a unique interview. He talked about some really personal things, so that was unique. He probably opened up more than he ever has, publicly or privately with me. So I was really just shocked with the access that he gave us. And I'm going to get to interview Missouri tomorrow. I'm going to Kansas City to do a seminar, and Coach Smith said I could stick my head in on practice and interview a bunch of their guys. So a bunch of those, once I, get technologically savvy and figure out how to plug this all into the laptop and send it to you guys, we'll have a bunch of those that we can put up in the next weeks coming up.
Awesome. Well, David, as we mentioned before we dug into the rankings, the rankings this year presented by Resolite. This podcast is sponsored by Resolite Sports Products, your one source for both classic and lightweight mats. From Resolite Zip Mat, the first and only tape-free mat to offer a waterproof interlocking connection system, to Resolite's exclusive Digiprint mat, the only fully customizable mat featuring unlimited graphics that brings unrivaled school branding to your new lightweight mat. Visit Resolite.com for all your wrestling mat needs. Resolite, the mat company. David, thank you as always.
Thank you.
Insight.
Thank you. Paul Gilbert, the president of Resolite, is the man. Awesome guy. Does a lot for people. So good for them.
Yeah, we're fortunate to have them on board this year. Happy to have them on board. And as you mentioned, David, you can check back to trackwrestling.com for your Mat Chat interview this week with Mike Powell, guy that has coached a lot of tremendous wrestlers through the years, including a couple U23 World Team members.
Yeah.
So looking forward to that. He's got a tremendous story, and certainly be sure to check out all of David's rankings, the Division I preseason rankings presented by Resolite. Those will be up on trackwrestling.com. You can download. If you are listening to us on trackwrestling.com now, you can also download and listen on the go and dig up our past episodes of Weighing In and David's past episodes of Matt Chats on the Matt Talk Podcast Network. Go on to iTunes, check that out. Lots of good shows that Jason Bryant has up on the Matt Talk Podcast Network. If you're already listening to us on iTunes on the Matt Talk Podcast Network, be sure to go on to trackwrestling.com, check out the U23 Trials and coverage from up in Rochester. That'll do it for this week's edition of Weighing In. For David Mirikitani, I'm Andy Hamilton. Thanks for listening.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.